off doing this evening routine, and I find that quite interesting in itself because I have to question why, and I think it's that my evenings are so sacred and peaceful to me that I didn't really want to record them and have them take place and take up my evening. I think from being young, I've been educated by my mum and by my grandma to always believe that the evening is a time of rest. And in the etiquette within our family, we have the etiquette that we will not ring each other after sort of 7:30 on an evening, because the evenings are a time of rest and relaxation. Now, for me, my evenings can look different depending on whether my partner is at home or whether it is the summer or the winter, because obviously it gets dark at different times depending on the season. In the winter in the UK, it can get dark as early as 3 p.m, and in the summer it doesn't get dark till about 10 p.m. Now, obviously, the time that the sun goes down dramatically affects what my evening routine looks like, as does what I have done in that day. So, for instance, I would absolutely love if we had a garden every morning to take tea in the garden and get some fresh air, but we don't. We live in an apartment, and there isn't even much privacy in the apartment because we overlook a huge hotel, which means they overlook us. So there are certain things I have to do to get some privacy, and although I love sitting in my hammock or sitting at my desk and looking down the lane to the trees, there are only certain things that I can do to relax on an evening. So one thing that I like to do is, when it is usually around 4 p.m, is I like to pack everything away and have sort of an hour to myself before my partner comes home, and that usually looks like this. So usually, because I've got things on my mind from my day of work, I will write my to-do list for the following day, because that allows me to get everything out of my mind, empty my mind, not be thinking about what I have to do the next day, because it's all down on my digital notepad on my phone. And then I can usually think, right, I will do something that I want to do to relax for an hour, and I will make a cup of tea and an afternoon snack, because as an English person I do like to have afternoon tea most days, although the snack may take a different form each day. It could be something as simple as a piece of fruit, or one of my personal favourites, a pistachio macaroon. I will then usually catch up on a little bit of reading or doing some kind of hobby craft activity for an hour, but nothing that involves too much energy at this time in the afternoon. I thought it might be worth pointing out here the artifice that I also felt whilst coming to record this video, because obviously, whilst ever you are aware that a camera is filming you, you're never going to be completely natural. For instance, there is a point in this filming of my evening routine that when I come back from my walk, which you're about to see, I usually will either put on my comfy house hoodie or borrow a pair of my partner's shorts or my linen trousers, or sometimes I will wear my very thin dressing gown, which for obvious reasons I did not feel comfortable doing on this video. So for the purposes of just showing you all what my typical evening routine looks like when my partner isn't at home, I have obviously kept my clothes on, as I don't actually wear pyjamas either when I do get into bed. I also thought that I would choose this opportunity to mention in this evening routine video that I do believe that reading is a very enriching, educational activity to do. However, I am not going to be pretentious and snobby about other what I believe are art forms and also enriching activities to do, because I feel like that goes on a lot in many of these evening routines. And I personally believe that film and documentaries are just another modern day medium of mediating to vast amounts of people topics that can be important. Now, obviously, those can vary greatly in degree of how important the subjects are, but if we look at things like David Attenborough's documentaries about the natural world, it enables us all to see things that we wouldn't possibly have been able to see 100 years ago. So the idea of being snobby about television and film as a medium and only reading books is something that I find quite ridiculous. And as a background in filmmaking, it's something I definitely don't agree with. It's around this time of day that if I haven't had much fresh air already in the morning, although typically I do like to go out in the morning for a walk and also to run errands, I will then definitely go out now. We have lots of lovely parks and Victorian landscape gardens, and obviously I'm by the coast, so I can go get a little bit of coastal air, and I just think it's good to just get that little bit of extra fresh air in for the day before coming home. And it is at this point that I will usually have a bath and change into my comfier clothing. Although for this video I didn't want to do that. I feel like my whole bathing routine and hygiene and product routine that I use as a minimalist could be a whole video on its own. So that is what I will do at a later date. So just for now, I've walked into my bathroom to symbolise this is when I would normally have a bath. But we're not doing that here for this video. So now I get all my living room ready to shut down into evening mode and close the curtains for some privacy, as normally this is when I would be in my very thin linen dressing gown. Living behind a hotel definitely has its pros and cons. Obviously the con being that people can watch you, but the pro is that you can also be a nosy neighbour and watch other people. And I have to say, one of my favourite things, because it is a hotel that allows dogs, is when people that are visiting bring their dogs into the hotel rooms and the dogs are just so happy. And I often have dogs staring at me into my window and I'm waving at the dogs across the way, and it's just really actually quite a nice little moment that brings me joy whenever I see dogs on holiday with their owners. But the downside is obviously that on a morning, if I just wanted a peaceful cup of tea with the windows open and a bit of fresh air, I can't really without being overlooked, as that is when the guests are all also waking up in the morning. It is also around now that I would make my evening meal, and typically this will be pasta or sushi or some kind of fish and rice dish. But as this video is already quite long, I've not included loads of clips of me making food. I'm sure you can imagine that. And if you would like to see typical things I make to eat, what a great way to find out what I do make by going over to my Instagram, where I sometimes do share my meals and things that I've made. But after dinner, typically at some point I will have a cup of tea and settle down to some kind of documentary that I will love watching on the projector, or a film, and that can range from a very artsy movie to a general Hollywood blockbuster, because who doesn't love a Hollywood blockbuster occasionally? As long as it is not what we only consume, I think balance is key. We don't have to say no to all mass-produced media. We just have to be mindful about what we are consuming, I think, and realise that there are all different kinds of perspectives in the world, and that is one good thing that different mediums do for us. They give us different perspectives on the world that otherwise, and especially without travel, we wouldn't be able to have. Also, as somebody who would consider myself to be an eco-minimalist, or somebody who is trying my best to be eco-friendly, I do, even though I live in England, try to get by using the heating as little as possible. It's also very expensive. That doesn't mean to say that I don't use it. As somebody quite lovely pointed out to me in the comments quite recently, that real minimalists apparently don't use heating. Well, you do if your temperatures get to around -2 and -4, which they can living by the coast in England, and I'm sure many people who live in even colder climates would also definitely attest to that. So whilst we can try to be as minimalist as possible and as eco-friendly as possible by having blankets, even putting on a pair of woolen socks sometimes, and wearing a big house hoodie, we do occasionally have the heating on, but I do my best to not have to do that and to limit it. It is my hope that eventually, when we have our own cabin, to make all energy sources as sustainable as possible and have solar power and things like that. It is now a little bit later on, and after I've watched a movie or a documentary, I decide to retreat to my bedroom, as I think this is a good way of helping me to feel sleepier and get me in the mood to want to sleep. Because as a creative person, my mind often feels active on an evening, because I think that because nothing else is being requested of me from that day and the productivity of the day is behind me, it almost allows my brain to relax to such a point that it becomes creative. It somehow feels stimulated by the fact that there isn't actually anything else being asked of me for that day. It is time to be able to do what we want. It is free time. And although I try my best every day to live a slow, simple life, there is just something extra special about the evenings that really allows for that even more. You know that in general you are not going to get pestered by text messages and phone calls. You know that people are settling down for the evening also in general. So there is just this moment that I feel comes later on in the evening that doesn't exist at any other point of the day. For instance, the morning may bring hope and productivity, aims and goals for the day, but the evenings ask nothing of us, and it is in that freedom that my mind is able to wander and create and have the free space to think of all kinds of possibilities. Now that my mind is even calmer, having got out any creative ideas I had on paper or on my digital notes, as I am just using this last notepad up, I then usually will put on some kind of atmospheric wall on the projector, or watch some ASMR, which really helps my mind just kind of zone out a little bit more. I think it's almost a little bit meditative, like a guided meditation, although I hate using that word. And sometimes where I would just choose silence, sometimes it just gives me an image to focus on and feel peaceful with, because like I mentioned at the beginning of this video, I don't have the luxury of, say, having a garden or a porch to sit on. And at this time in the evening, like early in the morning, I can't just sit in the window because there are lots of tourists and visitors and guests in the hotel that would also be looking back. It's around this time that I usually decide to have what I call my last tea of the evening, because yes, I am a typical English person and lots of tea drinking has gone on throughout the evening, but now we switch to some kind of tranquil tea that's going to perhaps aid sleep even more. Now, I am not a lover of chamomile, so I stick to some other form of bedtime tea like vanilla tranquility, and there are many more out there that also aid sleep. I am a big lover of herbal remedies and herbal teas, so I go for my last cup of tea, which also helps aid hydration throughout the night, because once I fall asleep, I do not wake up. I do not wake up to drink water throughout the night. It is now with a fully quietened mind that I sip on my tea and have the tea as a mindful and meditative practice of its own, and I allow my mind to be as quiet as possible and try to empty my mind of any other thoughts, having got things out of my mind, gotten things down on paper or on digital paper as the case may be, and I've already written my to-do list earlier in the evening, so there is truly nothing left to think about. My whole evening routine is geared towards calming my mind for as calm a peaceful sleep as possible, so that I can go to sleep having not any worries or thoughts about what the next day will bring, and that usually works. And the absolute last thing that I then do, having just drunk my tea, is I go brush my teeth so that my teeth can be completely clean throughout my night's rest. Obviously, this is purely symbolic. I do not get into bed fully clothed, but I feel this does show the artifice, at least, of the evening routines. This is what a typical evening alone looks like for me, with the odd difference that I have mentioned, but all my evening is geared towards creating calm even more, which I feel is a very minimalist value. We're always trying to keep our homes calm, our mind calm, and I also want my sleep to be calm. So if you're all watching on an evening, good night.